Welcome back to the Under Construction podcast, where we talk to the leaders behind the built environment. Today, I'm joined by Holly Cindell. With over 25 years in the construction industry, she's held executive level positions with McCarthy Builders and Lendlease prior to finding her own consulting business over 8 years ago. With a strong passion for women in construction, I'm looking forward to talking about her career, her story of entering the industry, and the journey that she's been on. So let's get started. Firstly, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast, Holly. How are you today?
I'm good, thanks. Thanks for having me.
Amazing. Well, I firstly maybe just want to head back to kind of the start of your career journey, and understand really firstly what influenced your decision to get into the construction industry.
So I think, to get into construction, my grandfather had been a civil engineer and had a construction company. So when I decided to go back to engineering school, when my first major in college just didn't give a good job, that was just an option I looked at. And as I got into engineering school, I liked the built environment versus the design environment. And then when I got out, decided to pursue construction.
Amazing. And what was then sort of your first role in the industry?
My first role, I was started on the Red Line, which is the subway system in Los Angeles when it was first getting built in the late 80s. And I was on a negotiated contract. So it was me and a superintendent who worked as part of a larger project, and we got to really do everything. So it was really kind of great.
Wow, kind of thrown into the deep end early on, get a
Yes.
feel for the whole process.
Yes, it was
Amazing.
wonderful. A good learning experience.
Absolutely. And what sort of point did you really sort of feel yourself feeling confident in what you were doing then?
I want to say that it probably, with every day your confidence grows. I mean, any entry-level person has some fears. It doesn't matter what it is. But I think it was probably about month 3 and at a meeting negotiating a contract, and our boss was there with us, and we negotiated. We were very excited. And as we left, he then said, "How did you do that estimate and takeoff?" I explained it to him. I said, "Oh, I'm really good." And he said, "No, you're probably about 40% short on your material. You didn't put your waste in there." And I was, of course, panicked. Oh my gosh. And that is when he said, "But you made the decision, you went forward." He goes, "Now it's time for my job. My job is to find a way to get you out of the mess ups I'm asking you to put yourself in by making decisions. Keep making decisions and we'll figure it out." And I think that was on a day that I just realized I had someone who had my back. They wanted me to learn and make decisions, and it was time to grow. So it was a big turning point for me.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's an amazing way of really sort of phrasing that feedback, right? From whoever that individual was, instead of kind of saying, should have done it this way, really acknowledging that you made the decision and that was the positive from that situation, that you decided that you were just going to do it. And like you said, I mean, obviously that was a big turning point for you and the confidence in your career. How would you, obviously women in construction is something that we're both incredibly passionate about. How would you build confidence early on, especially in environments where you might have been the minority in that situation?
So I guess I look back and, first I'm going to say, being a woman in construction, I didn't grow up in an environment where I was ever told I couldn't do something because I was a girl. My dad had 2 daughters. We did what he wanted to do because we're the only kids he had to do it with. So it was kind of a shock when you first said, "Yeah, but you're a woman in construction," So basically on my first jobs, really what I did was made myself indispensable. I had my job to do, but then if you had some time that you created, you went to the superintendents and you asked to do more. So I think that built the early confidence. And the more you did for them and the more they realized they could do for you, you could do for them, the more they asked you to do. So your confidence just started to grow because you were just delivering and learning and being excited about what was happening. And that was a big booster on what it was. And I think it doesn't matter if you're female or male. how is it that you go and become the go-to person? I think that becomes critical early on in your career.
Absolutely. And showing that kind of curiosity, right? And, putting yourself in those situations is super important, especially early on. And sort of fast forwarding then to today, obviously founding your own consulting organization. What does your current role look like in that capacity?
I'm at the point in my career where a lot of people say, "Are you retired now?" And I say, "No, I started a consulting company." And so, over 40 years in the industry, I've learned a lot of things. So with my clients, it's varied on what I do. And, kind of my motto is, if I can bring you value, sure, I'll do it. I don't care if it's something I learned day one in my career or something I was doing the last time I left a GC. If it brings you value, let me help you. And so that's kind of what I do. I have a very diverse role that I have with all my clients. So from being the owner's rep on a project to just working changes for some, to helping develop claims, looking at schedule. So a variety of things that I've done over my career that just, they're exciting, they're new, it's different. So it just keeps me busy.
Yeah, absolutely. And I speak with folks, pretty often who are interested at some point in their career and potentially, branching out to do something similar to what you have done. What would you say, from your experience doing that, you enjoy most about the role, but also that you find challenging in that position as well?
Yeah, I think that, for me, I loved every day of my career. I love what I do. I love the challenge, the problem solving. So I think it's really about, finding those elements that you really like. And I think over the course of time of me being in my consulting, I have some clients go, "Oh my gosh, we feel like we just give you all our problems. But you know what? I'm an engineer. You solve problems." So I really like that. I really like the problem solving aspect of it. So if you're going to go into consulting, I think that you really got to go and find that niche that is the part of your long career you had that really still excites you. So that becomes critical. Otherwise, you're just drudging on and you might as well, go do something fun, go play tennis, so that's been important. I've really kind of liked that, the problem solving aspect, and I get to pick and choose now which problems I want to solve.
So. Absolutely. Yeah. So finding a passion and a niche that, one, you're good at, but two, something that you're not going to get bored doing and helping people with is super important if it's something, a career path that people want to go down. And with that in mind, then talking about your career path, Holly, did it just sort of evolve over time, or did you know that, that was something you always wanted to do?
No, I think, what? I think from the first day I got into construction, I knew that I had found my career. And it kind of evolved, I guess what it was important to me was that I become good at every aspect of construction. And so as I grew in the company I worked for, I learned every role that was in the trailer. So when I was running work and the PM, I could, and it was concrete pour day and I had to write checks or do the checks because you pay them daily, I could do that. I didn't have to go find someone else's admin on another job to come and help me. I sat down and you did what it was. So I think that that's kind of, wasn't really a plan. It was just, I think that what I saw is that I needed was this drive and this ability to learn and the curiosity to learn every aspect of it. And I think that evolved, part of my career, that I really made myself a good builder first. I technically became really good at all things project site.
And then obviously built on that from there, but get the basics and everything about that, that you're an expert in, and then go from there.
Yes.
And did you ever find yourself having to, take a step maybe sideways or even backwards to move forward in your career?
I kind of look at it a little differently. I think the moves I made during my career were for reasons. I never went and made a decision because I wanted a new position. There was something that I felt I needed to leave at the company I was at, and then I went in search.
Mm-hmm.
So the first 20 years of my career, I worked on what we call rip and reads, hard bid work. And not to simplify it, but sometimes in hard bids, especially back then, the end justified the means. You were very company focused. That's what it was. You hard bid a job, and that's what it was. And I felt I needed some other kind of exposure. So when I left that company, I went in search of another company, and there I got different types of contracts, design, build, negotiated, and your focus changes. So in the second one, I kind of developed more the soft skills side that made me a better rounded project manager. I mean, I was good at the build from the first company I worked for. I really developed my mentoring and people and development skills at the second company I worked for. So that kind of, rounded me and helped with promoting. When I went for the third company, I basically went and said, I'm sort of at the end of my career, one more company. And I went project looking. I hadn't built a high rise, and I went in search of who was building a high rise when I knew I needed to leave the second company I was with. And so those were kind of my moves. I never chased the title, and I never chased the paycheck. I really kind of chased the personal satisfaction of what I wanted to get out of my career and my love of what I was doing. So it was really kind of a different aspect of what I was looking for when I went looking for a job. But it was also based on the fact that there was something that I could no longer, something that was wrong where I was, that then didn't allow me to bring my best self to work anymore. And I knew I needed to make a change just so that I always brought my best self to work.
No, absolutely. And I think that that's, being aware of that is super important, and also identifying something that, maybe that you want to do or you're passionate, like you mentioned about doing a high rise, that you couldn't do at that other company. So then you made the move to pursue that, right?
Yeah.
And, it's important to have that reason as to, to make that move or to change position, as opposed to just, like you say, chasing a title or a compensation or what have you. Having that genuine reason that's going to get you out of bed every day is super important.
Correct.
And what do you think really helped you stand out as you progressed?
Probably quick thinking, problem solving. I think an ability to see the whole. When you start a project, you're really kind of a bunch of parts. And then what does that whole look like? I think one of the things, and I think honesty with myself, honesty with my skill set. You're talking about being a person who came out of an engineering program, and you go out and you're running a job, and you've got people who have come up from the trades who are your superintendents. Now, technically, as it relates to putting the form system together and getting it built, I'm never going to have that knowledge base that they have. But when you look at the big picture and maybe something's going wrong, what you can do is challenge them, and you can try to make their box bigger, the box that they think out of. And I think that's something I was really good at, is starting everything with not you're going to do this, but what if fill in the blank. So I think I was challenging on that aspect. I think that the ability to see a bigger picture and to say there must be another way of doing something allowed you to challenge them with being supportive so that they could grow also. And I think that helped a lot. That helped a lot in my career and my teams and their confidence, going back to that 3-month thing with the guy who said, no, I'm here to help you get out of your mess ups. It was the same idea that I had through the rest of my career. And I think my teams knew that. My teams knew that they could come to me. And so I think that's part of just the skill set that I brought that allowed me to give that. And that was just the process of how I thought, that engineering training.
Yeah, absolutely. And how did you find really communicating that with folks? So not that it was coming across that you were kind of like questioning, but coming across from a place of, like you said, what if we do this? You know, was it always easy to communicate that, or did sometimes it come up with a bit of abrasion? How did you find that?
You know what? I think early in my career it was very abrasive. I wouldn't have wanted. I wouldn't have wanted to work for me. I mean, my expectations of myself were very high. So sometimes early in my career, I pushed that to the people that worked for me. No, I think it's about how did you develop that relationship with your team. So when they knew, I mean, early on, I mean, there'd be some that come in and tell me what they think I wanted to hear if I could see something was wrong. And then you go out in the field and you see that's not right. And it only took one conversation to say, look, I don't expect things to be perfect, but I expect you to tell me the truth because I'm here to help us solve problems. And I am good at it. And it didn't take long for people to realize that, so you really kind of, a few demonstrations of your intent really went a long way. And I think that helped with the relationship. It helped with, I love what I do and I just want us all to succeed. And I think that came through. And so it made the conversations easier. I mean, pretty soon you did have your superintendents or your foreman coming in to say, hey, what would you do here? And that's rewarding. And I think it just grows with every day. One of the things, this is, I was working on one of the subway projects, and I mean, my biggest regret is I lost this incredible engineer who said he was bored. It was a great project. It went really well. And one of the things he said is, and this is pre-cell phone, he said, when the superintendents call and they need something, they always call you on the radio. They never call any of the rest of us. And I said, well, that's because I always get them answers. I said, beat me to the radio because I know you can give them the answers. Yeah. And he was kind of shocked, but it's kind of that when you deliver, you become the go-to person. Mm-hmm. And I think that just helps make all the conversations easier and more difficult. It also helps that when you do need to have the hard conversation that maybe is a little bit reprimanding as to why didn't you think about something, that that they should have, that it makes the conversation be easier and open and honest so you all can learn from it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So it's kind of building that mutual respect, being there when they need Correct. You, and then being able to have those conversations in turn, like you mentioned.
Yeah.
And obviously some great advice, was there any advice or a mentor that has had a lasting impact on yourself, would you say?
And as I said, the person who was my boss on the first project became my mentor for 20 years through that first company. Wow. And, to the point of the first time I was leading work, my first job as a project manager, I had a major mess up with the superintendent. And I went to him and said, you know what? He's not doing this right. And I need to pause this and get this straightened out. And he looked at me and he said, you do what you think is best. I'll support you. Mm-hmm. And, of course, he got called by the superintendent who screamed and yelled about how I didn't know what I was doing. And he supported me and we got it straightened out. And it turned out my relationship with this person turned out to be okay. And we worked around the problem we had. Mm-hmm. But that's part of it. You need to go with that. You need to know that you're supported and you need to know when to ask questions. So my mentor really instilled that in me. And I realized how lucky I was that he had the confidence in me and he was there to give me honest feedback. He wasn't there to solve my problems. He was there to help me solve my problems.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, it sounds like, as you mentioned, you learned obviously a lot from that individual, and then I'm sure tried to bring a lot of his leadership into your own leadership as well. What was your real, first experience managing or leading people in that sort of role?
As I've mentioned, I was tough. My expectations, for myself were really very high. Mm-hmm. Now, I think that's regardless. I think that's how I was on my expectations for myself. So it was a learning experience. The thing that was probably hardest is that I feel that are my male counterparts when they are a project manager on a job and they go to the next job and you have a lot of the same people, what they achieved at the first job, they take to the second job and it's easier. I found that leading projects, what I had succeeded at on the first job didn't come with me to the second job. At the second job, I had some of the same people and they challenged me again on my competency for the first few months. And then they realized it's Holly here and, we're going to be okay. And that was kind of eye-opening, is that my skill set didn't travel with me. They knew I had it. They knew I was tough. And one of the greatest compliments I heard at one point was, you know what? It's tough being on a job with Holly. You've got to be on your A game. But you know what? If you get into a bad situation, thank God she's on our team. So, that's a compliment as well as, whoa, you're kind of tough.
Absolutely.
So I think that was just part of it is, making sure that you were there, try to challenge them before it gets into problems. And I think my management skills have changed over time. It's more questioning versus, okay, I'm in charge here and I need to make sure everything is perfect. It's really kind of, finding out the skills of all the team and enhancing those and leveraging them. So it's been an evolution. But I think just making sure that you showed early on in your management that you were there and you should be sitting in that seat. That was kind of important. That was the biggest challenge, I think, when you started to manage jobs. Is demonstrating that you would earn that seat on that project.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And then from a leadership standpoint, I'm sure there'll be listeners, who are thinking kind of, I want to carve my pathway, my career progression. What would you say when you were a senior leader, would you really look for when you were promoting somebody? What sort of qualities, characteristics?
For me, I look for curiosity. I look for the desire to be challenged and learn. Drive that you have. This is kind of a hard question because, we're still 11% women in construction in the US, and that includes everyone, the tradespeople, everyone. So I think that there's a lot of elements that are still live and well in our industry. And if you read the literature, you hear, if you succeed and you're up here in your career, you've got up here. So what do you look for? If you succeeded and you're here, you're looking for someone like you. And when you're a woman sitting in a room and it's 20 people and you're the only woman, you're very different. It's not what they see, which is in themselves. So I think we're still faced with a little bit of that. So I think in that aspect of promoting, I really do look for that. And I think that you've got to use your voice. A lot of that advancement is making sure that you're holding them accountable also. As you promote and you get better at it, it has to work both ways. You need to hold your manager accountable as well as the manager needs to be accountable to you so that you're known, because I do think, we talk a lot about it. I do think that there's a reason that there's only 11% women. And I think we have a lot of women who leave the industry, and that's a trend that should change. And I think a lot of it is because they do not see, they see that there's still a ceiling. There might be more women in construction, but are we getting them at all levels of the industry? And I think we still have a gap there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that, what you mentioned there is super important. And that's a reason why, I wanted to, speak with yourself and also highlight this is that, we're getting more women into the industry, and it starts at that kind of, that apprenticeship level and getting them in from that area. But then are we really making sure that we're focusing on then elevating them within businesses and allowing them to have that progression? Right. So hearing kind of your experience and hearing how you did it, and advice that you would give to those who are kind of trying to break down those barriers is super, super helpful. What advice would you then give to women considering a career in construction? You know, maybe not in the industry yet, but thinking about it.
You need to love what you do. You know, I think that goes for any industry, but especially construction, because it can be tough. It needs to excite you. The aspect of the work needs to excite you. Otherwise, it is a hard career. You are going to work long hours. There are some deadlines on projects. And so it can be challenging. You know, I like to say that no matter how horrible any day was in my career, there was at least a minute of good that when I came back the next day, I was just excited. Absolutely excited to be there. And I'm talking about as I promoted, and you're not necessarily on a job site every day running the work, you have multiple projects. You know, I'd go to a job site, and as it got closer, I was parking and walking around, you could hear the man lift going and you could see the crane going. And you know, it's that feeling of excitement where you get sweaty palms and you're excited because, oh, you got to have that feeling. That was me in construction. I loved it. I loved going and looking and what is it? And oh, I haven't seen this before. And oh, this looks like something's up. What are you doing here? You know, all of that. I mean, it was just an exciting career. So you've got to really love it. And you've got to willing to put the time in. You've got to be able to take the good with the bad. And you've got to be able to let go the bad days to come back with a brave attitude on the next day.
Yeah.
And it's worth it. That's the biggest advice. It is worth it. If it's your love and your passion, don't let anyone say no.
No, amazing. I think, you know, incredible advice, because I'm sure that, you know, some days are tough and I'm sure people will, you know, doubt their decision. Should I have not? And, you know, just that continuing fight, like you mentioned, it is worth it. You're doing what you love. And it's important to keep remembering that. You know, is there anything that you wish more women realized about their own potential and, you know, advocated for themselves in a way?
I have to say that you're good. Don't let anyone put doubt in your head on what you can achieve. And that because, you know, you're the only woman, you know, don't let someone make a decision about you that's going to be a showstopper for you. You control your decisions. You control your destiny. And there's a reason that the literature talks about diversity in workplace, because it brings diversity in decisions and diversity on how you talk about a problem. And there's a lot to be said that sometimes less testosterone can lead to better decisions and more decisions that you wouldn't necessarily think about. You know, you're never going to be able to carry the 100-pound sack on the job site. But then again, the men aren't supposed to carry the 100% sack either. So don't let them tell you that because you don't have muscles, you're not as good as them. You are as good as them. And be out there and do it because you've got the ability.
No, amazing. And, you know, we talk about kind of skills throughout this conversation and, you know, what's important in the industry and things like that. But as the industry is evolving, you know, with technology, AI, BIM, all of this, you know, what sort of skills do you think will matter most in the next sort of 5 to 10 years?
You know, there's the aspect of technology. You know, technology for me makes your life easier. You know, that is how I use the tool. You know, one of the things that's a little bit worrisome, you know, think about it. A hammer hasn't changed since the Flintstones era. You know, it's still this heavy metal thing that you hit a little nail with. So that's still going to be there in construction. So you still need the competency of what it takes to build with the hammer, even though we're getting new technology. So what is technology helping us with? It means that you've got plans that are now on your computer instead of on a plan table on these big sheets of paper that are 3 by 4 feet big on a big job. But you need to understand and know what that information is. Yes, you can put it into BIM and 3D, but you still better know how to read a 2D set of drawings, and that's where I worry. Have we lost some of the old-fashioned technical skills because we allow the electronic side of it to help shape us? Can you see in 3D without having a BIM model? Can you take that? I think that becomes important. And I hope that we don't lose that, because I think it's still going to be needed, because someone needs to program these things in order. If we're going to go into a robot installed workforce or something along those lines, you still need to know if the program is right. So you still need the technical side. So I think that still becomes important, that we make sure that our new builders have the technical competency and can really put the work together if they needed to without having an electronic element.
Sure. So we're not replacing those skills, we're maybe just enhancing them with the technology.
Correct.
No, that's super important, like you mentioned. And I think there's a fine line between it. And I think that we're still evolving what that might look like. And then finally, what do you think the industry still needs to do to attract more women?
I think there needs to be more conversations about equity and advancement. I think there still needs to be more conversation, and this just doesn't focus. It's about that work-life balance that is important. And I've said in the past that women are going to lead the conversation about the work-life balance. I think in our industry, I know early on, if you had a guy who decided he was going to want to go out on paternity leave, it was like, what's he thinking? He didn't have the baby. But I think that's becoming more acceptable. And I think when you start to recognize and accept that workers want this same balance of equity and everything, and it's not a deterrent, it is life, that you're going to get more women who stay in our industry. And I think that becomes important. I think that's just, one of the things that our industry needs to grow, to accept how we're changing this, all the while instilling the importance of, we've still got a job to do. We're still a company that's for profit, and it does matter, and you still need to be dedicated, but it has to be the give and take. It's not all one way.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think that, hopefully we'll get there. Like you said, 11%, we're still working on that, but it's these types of conversations, hopefully, that can, push that where it needs to go little by little.
Yes.
And finally, any recommendations, Holly, books, podcasts, shows, you would say for anyone listening?
I think that whichever way you find is easiest to find your community, you need that community. I think being a woman in construction, you need to find a way to get the support you need if you don't have it where it is. I've said that I could have spent my whole career not talking about being a woman in construction, but then I was asked to do it. And so that's where YOP started, which is a support group for women, mentoring and development of women in construction here in California, that I was part of starting, a nonprofit. What you're going to find is that you're not alone, that you might be experiencing something, but I can guarantee you, if you went to an event, you would find 40% of the women have had that same experience. So utilize that, leverage that. If you find the easiest way for you to do it is through books, read the books, read what the trends are saying when you see something that's different. I do the McKinsey report, and I read HBR, Harvard Business Review, when they have things about teams and how the generations are changing, because that does change. Every generation changes. So it's about finding your community. It's about sharing and finding the place that you're comfortable with.
No, amazing. And you mentioned YOPs there. So that's something that we can obviously, again, point women in California to look towards and, be part of that community as well.
Yes. And YOPs is, they have monthly events. We've got chapters in Northern California and Southern California. It started, I think 2013, we launched it, and it's grown. It's open to men and women. We do have men who come. We have monthly events that are varied. But I think that's one of the things that we find is the number of women who say, wow, I'm not alone. You might be the only woman in a small specialty trade company or something, and you go to a YOPS event and you see all these women of all varied ages, and you ask a question and you find, wow, they've had the same experience here, So it's kind of good. I think that's the community you need to find.
Absolutely. No, I totally agree. Well, look, I mean, it's been, a super interesting conversation, highlighting some great issues and challenges, but also success stories as well, and advice from your career, Holly. So I really appreciate that. And everyone listening, please like, subscribe. I'll see you all in the next episode. But appreciate it again, Holly. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care.
Bye-bye.